So, how is our housing market doing in Canada of 2025? How is our condo market looking in Canada of 2025 and the future? Well, folks, it feels like we just started a new school year and we have already failed the entire year with an F, right? So why do I say that? Because the numbers, the future trajectory, and everything else that has been compounding constantly, it's not giving a bright future. I have no idea how this is going to be fixed, even though there are some suggestions and there are some ideas that I can maybe throw across the screen. However, let's start into the video and let's see how deep this housing market issue actually is in Canada. All right, so as mentioned, like we already failed the entire school year. We just stepped in and we got a big F. So what do I mean by that? Well, Toronto just got a failing grade for housing starts in 2025. Sales are down by 91%. Let that sink in for a second. New builds are down by 58% and over 10,000 construction jobs have already vanished. This isn't just a slowdown, it's a warning sign for every buyer, builder, and policymaker in Ontario. So look, guys, I mean, like it's just out there. If you know the people in construction, and I'm sure you do, people in real estate, I'm sure you do, mortgage brokers, talk to them, and you will see that they're not doing as good. If they're honest with you, right? There are not many jobs out there to fulfill the needs that Canadians actually need, right? Because when you have an income and when you're generating that particular income, yes, you can have a bad month, you can have a bad quarter, but if it's constantly, if you're being in a deficit and if there's no light at the end of the tunnel, at least for the meantime, what happens, you will hit the wall. And there's so many people hitting that particular wall, right? The jobs are not being renewed, and I'll get into that. I spoke to a manager on a construction site. I'll get into that in a second. But let's just dive into more numbers. So the report card data. Explain who RESCON is and why the report measures 34 municipalities from 2001 2004 and the average versus January and June of 2025. So the explanation of RESCON is the report measurement of all these municipalities. And guess how Toronto did? So Toronto's numbers, housing starts down by 58%, sales are down by 91%. Toronto, one of 22 municipalities to get an F, including Brampton at a negative 50%. So the provincial market is actually 1.5 million homes by 2031. And we are already behind by a mile, right? So how do we measure this, right? If we have a goal, an X goal by 2031, we simply divide it by months, by years, and the units that have been actually completed and the trajectory, what we have planned to actually complete, right? So why this matters. So housing starts, future supply, fewer starts today. Future completions in 2 to 4 years are completely dead. So this is exactly what happens, right? And I had a coach, a mentor, like back in the day, and it was a simple task that he made me do, and he was absolutely right, 1000%. And it's very simple. So he said, like, look at your calendar today, right? So let's say today is January 1st. So if you did not work today, if you did not contribute to your work today, and if you did not convert anybody today, in 90 days from today, you will not be paid, right? That mark on that calendar, you're not getting paid, right? So obviously, when I got into the industry and stuff like that, decades later, I found out, like, obviously it is completely true. And same goes for construction units and all these big, massive complexes, right? Like they take time to generate, but also they take time to build. But then the question, a huge question that I got for so many people calling in and commenting, why is it so that so many cranes are on so many towers in Toronto and Toronto GTA? It seems like wherever you go and wherever you drive, there's something happening and the construction is booming, right, in that space. Well, if you go back, right, 3 to 5 years, that's when those units were actually sold, right? Like they're just fulfilling those shoes that happened years ago. So 3 to 5 years from today, you will see 0 cranes probably, and there are not going to be any jobs available for realtors, mortgage brokers, construction people, and who knows what, right? So I did a video on AI, how AI and all these systems will probably replace majority of realtors and mortgage brokers in that field and whatnot. But obviously I already made that video and you can search on the homepage and you'll be able to find it. But let's dive into the collapse a little bit. Development charges skyrocketed from $5,000 in 1999, right? Think about that. From $5,000 in 1999 to $195,000 today on a new home in Toronto. So this is crazy, right? Like it's like from the development standpoint, and I know how the developers and the salespeople and like everybody is just calculated it very simply. All right, so if that's the charge, we will just, like push it down to the actual consumer or the buyer. Just punch it down to the pipeline, and then eventually the end user, the people that are actually buying, they will cover the cost for everything, right? The development charges, any increases in materials, you name it, right? Labor, inflation, plus profit, right? Like everything, the thirst is just the pond, it gets bigger, bigger, and bigger, right? So at one point, the end user will say enough, right? Even though I want it, I want a beautiful new home, but I cannot afford it, right? My income does not support that particular price tag, right? And then we get into the bottleneck where these developers and everybody is crying and going under because they're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do, right? There's no profits to be made. Well, listen, your product is too expensive. Nobody wants it and nobody is lining up for it anymore, right? Investors across the globe internationally, from my understanding, are not lining up to invest in Canada, right? Maybe some parts and some pockets, maybe some complexes here and there, right? But on a major scale, just to move the needle in our economy is not happening anymore. Too many regulations, red tapes, and it's slowing down the approval. Absolutely. High interest rates, weak demand, builders' financial stress, government initiatives, which is the HST rebates, infrastructure funds, haven't offset the actual pressure that is happening. So what is the solution? I mean, the list is probably huge, but we can start with some. So tax reform, lower development charges to get projects off ground would be wise. It gives the developers a little bit room to breathe and they can finally reduce the price without them going to bankruptcy. Cut red tape and speed up approvals. They should, right? Smarter immigration plus job growth alignment so new arrivals can actually work in housing related fields. This is a big one, right? Just because we're welcoming and we should. Like, look, this country has been built on immigration, including myself, it's fine. However, we need to have a trajectory how that particular immigrant, newcomer that is welcome, how can they actually prosper, right? What can we do to filter them out, and how can we actually make our economy boom? Just because we have more people and our population grows doesn't mean we will have a positive outcome, right? It can backfire. In fact, is already backfiring because people are fighting for every single role at every single level as we speak, from the high level to the low level. Try getting a job into an entry level, like, with all the respect, but like Tim Hortons and McDonald's and one of these minimum wage jobs, right? Like you cannot even get a job. You could be a CEO of a huge company and you apply to something like that just so you can break a couple of months until you get something better. You cannot even fulfill those shoes anymore, right? So on every level is becoming extremely hard, and people are drowning in debt, right? And I spoke to my friends, and they were cool for a long time, right? Like they're like, it's okay, it'll bounce back, and then it slipped out. I believe it slipped out, to be honest with you. I don't know it for a fact, but it kind of slipped out. They're like, but like we had to dip into our savings and a little bit here and there. Like they want to make it all seem like, nothing is happening and that everything is prosperous. And like, I'm like, guys, are you kidding me? Like there's 4 seasons. We're definitely entering winter time. It's gonna be freaking freezing winter. We're in fall. Everything is falling. The market, you name it, right? They're like, yeah, but you know what? I'm like, listen, I get it. But how long can you survive dipping into your savings? Unless the savings is so enormous that you can survive for the next 2 decades. I get it. But I'm just saying, like, nobody has that kind of cushion, right? So they're kind of starting to scratch their head and whatnot. Then they started watching my videos, like even developers like Green Park in Oakville. I made a video on that. They reduce their own inventory, whatever they were holding as a developer, by 40%. Imagine how these people feel that actually purchased these units a few years ago. Like that's hundreds of thousands of dollars cut right there. Like that's a deficit that goes from their equity. They might not be able to close on top of that, right? Because of this new price point, right? And guess what? Everybody else has to follow. That's just the new price or market value or the new rule. All right. So speaking to a supervisor last week, and he went from a 60-hour crew. He had to lay off people, and he said, like, look, like from the 60-hour full weekend, full shifts and stuff like that, he started laying off first. No weekends, no overtime and stuff like that, and he has to start laying off. This is construction related. I don't know exactly which field. I personally think that he's because he was mentioning some steel studs and stuff like that. I think has to do with some framing, right? So as soon as they kind of lift that building or the condo from the ground up, right? So then they have to steel frame the inside, and then drywallers come and everything in between, electricians and plumbers and whatnot, right? But I'm saying, like, so they don't have the next project to go to, right? Like, I'm assuming this is a union at this point. But please comment below, like all of you trade workers and stuff like that, comment below. Let us all know what you guys are going through, right? Like, I mean, so at one point you guys were the essential worker. Today you're sitting on the street, right? So Toronto F grade isn't just a statistic. It's a warning that the system is breaking down before our eyes. If you're buyer, builder, and policymaker, you need to understand what this means for the next 5 years. So, question for you. Do you think the government can still hit 1.5 million homes target? Can they hit that 1.5 million homes target? I personally believe that they cannot. I don't know what will happen. I don't know who they can pull from across the globe, but it doesn't matter. Like, let's say the bottleneck, it's trades. Let's say we're lacking that. Who else is going to buy? Because we need the economy. We need us in other fields to be comfortable for the tradespeople to build and for us to buy. If people are getting laid off in the automotive industry, and it's happening, right? So who is going to buy, right? And then you have everything else that goes around, which is obviously the big and slow and retail and this and that. Hudson's Bay went bankrupt, right? That was pride of Canada, right? Hudson's Bay, like I'm sure you know. But you understand what I'm saying? So just by building these homes, we need people to buy them, and they need to have the budgeting and the approvals from the bank and everything else. And just to note, in 1974, Canada has broken that record at that time, right? And ever since 1974, we still couldn't break that record. Like even in the peak of our market, right, which was 2021, we could not outpace 1974, right? And we had everything. The lowest interest rates ever, the highest hype ever recorded, right? The highest growth, you name it, and we could not fulfill those shoes. So everything was rigged for success, and we still could not beat 1974. So it just shows that it's not only building it and developing it and finding a way of fulfilling that 1.5 million of homes in terms of units. Like, it goes much deeper. Like, people still have to feel comfortable, and they have to see the vision, and they have to make sure that they can actually fulfill their 2 or 3 decade mortgage, right? So I hope you gained some value out of this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.